largely not interested in it. The part of the trouble, I think, is moving on to more adult concepts. Whatever one means by God, you don't mean anything as childish as you start out with the idea of an old man with a beard. And, of course, nowadays, you wouldn't dare do that anyway because it should be an old woman. But in those days, it just, I thought of it as a person. I couldn't see any evidence for any person that could be called God, and nobody told me any. Nobody volunteered the information, either then or later. What this boils down to is a problem in words and the use of them. And I want to quote to you from a passage from the Bible, which I think is immensely wrong. This is a passage by John, Epistle to the Hebrews, in which he says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." End of quote. Now I want to contrast that with the motto of the Royal Society. This is a Royal Society, essentially it's a scientific society in England. The Royal Society, which was founded in 1660. Their motto is nullius in verba, which is derived from Horace, a poet of the first sentence, and abstracted from a long passage, but the general feeling people agree on. Nullius in verba means there's nothing in words. You can't prove anything with words. There's no authority in words. I see that's utterly different from what John was saying, that the Word was God. And this, of course, is absolutely basic to all of science. There's nothing in words. There's something behind the words, which we're trying to get at with words. And sometimes we fail, sometimes we succeed, but it's always questionable. And one of the things we have to accept is that some of the greatest scientists have confessed that they do not work with words, that these come later. These are the window dressing. Niels Bohr, who was the most important personality of the first half of the 20th century in theoretical physics. He inspired so many people. He set them on the right track to making Nobel Prize winners of themselves. When he was approached by a young man named Abraham Peiss, Peiss reported this contact this way. He said, "The first thing Bohr said to me was that it would be profitable for me to work with him only if I understood that he was a dilettante. He explained how he had to approach every new question from a starting point of total ignorance." Now, you see, this is a great contrast with what one usually thinks of great scholars who approach things with all the knowledge and so forth and so on. And Bohr said, "I'm just a dilettante. I'm just playing around. I don't know." Einstein was approached several times, principally by Hardin, who wrote a history or a treatise on the use of language in science and how scientists worked. Said, "The words or the language as they are written or spoken do not seem to play any role in my mechanism of thought." That's a pretty extreme statement for a man of Einstein's standing to make. And on another occasion he said, "I very rarely think in words at all. A thought comes and I may try to express it in words afterward." And he said the belief of certain people that thinking is always in words made him laugh. This, I think, we should take very seriously, and I think this is a way of operating not only among the giants in science, but also, to a lesser extent, to the extent that they can, among the ordinary foot soldiers, that a great many of them do not operate with words, except at the last moment, so to speak. They're operating with ideas, with visions of movement, of relationships, and so forth and so on. And somewhere along the line, before they can talk to somebody else, they have to put some words to it. And that, of course, is where the trouble may come in. Einstein, by the way, did not speak until he was 3 years old, so he'd ordinarily be classified as a backward child. And at 9, it was recorded that he spoke with great reluctance in class, as though he were thinking a long time before he'd be willing to speak. You see, so this is a deeply ingrained thing. He was not talkative. I find that it helps to think of our way of taking into ourselves the phenomena of the world, that we do this with 3 filters. The first filter is often called the literate filter, or the verbal filter, or the language filter, but let's say literate filter. And this, of course, must have been employed long before there was such a thing as literacy, that is, reading and writing. The second filter did not come in until science started, I think. And this is the numerate filter. You asked how much, how many, how big, how small. And as soon as you did that, many things that you thought you had firmly in mind turned out to be rather different from what you thought. Now this grew during about 2,000 years of the growth of science from the Greeks to the present time. And it was only beginning about a century ago that a third filter was added, finally in a very conscious way, and this is the one I call the ecolate filter, the filter of ecology, the filter that deals with the relations of one thing to another, of the relative sizes and the consequences of that, rates of change and the consequence of that, and the possibility of thresholds below which something won't happen,